"You don't need to say anything tonight, Mom. Just let me handle it." That's what David whispered as he brushed past me, carrying in the roast I cooked. I stood there holding the gravy boat like an unpaid waitress while he paraded into my dining room, laughing too loud, making Ivy the center of attention like he always does. I didn't argue, I just nodded. The knot in my throat had nothing to do with the food. The table was set with my late mother's china. I recognized the tiny chip on the rim of the soup bowl in front of me. I used to run my thumb across it like a worry stone when I was younger. Now, I sat 2 seats down from the head of the table, where Ivy had placed herself with a flippant, "I like the lighting here better." The room smelled like rosemary, wine, and polished lies. Ivy's friends, 3 women in glossy lipstick and sharper laughs, filled the chairs that once held my sisters. No one asked if I was okay with it. David was dazzling, of course. He always is. Charming, articulate, generous to strangers while whittling his mother down one comment at a time. He topped off everyone's glass but skipped mine. I kept my hands in my lap. Beneath the linen napkin, my fingers clutched the folded bank statement I'd picked up that morning. It was still warm then, fresh from the printer. Now it was damp with sweat. The clock above the stove ticked loud between lulls in conversation, slicing the air with each second. Ivy laughed about her new wellness retreat while wearing the bracelet I pawned my mother's brooch to buy for her birthday. She never thanked me. "Mom, could you not interrupt right now?" David shot at me, smiling as if it were a joke. His tone wasn't. I smiled back, small, deliberate. I had no intention of interrupting. I was planning to speak. Not now, not yet, but soon. First, I'd let the lies get comfortable. Then I'd unfold the truth. David used to make me toast with cinnamon when he was 10, always with too much butter, always with a proud smile like he'd just built me a house. He'd bring it in on a tray with a paper flower taped to the edge. "For the Queen," he'd say, bowing dramatically. I used to laugh so hard I'd cry. Or maybe I cried because I knew how rare quiet mornings were back then. His father wasn't a gentle man. Arguments in our kitchen used to rattle the cutlery drawer. But David would wedge himself between us, small shoulders tense, saying, "Don't talk to Mom like that." I was so proud of him. So proud. It made the bruises worth hiding. There's still a folded piece of construction paper in my jewelry box. A sun drawn in crayon with "Me plus Mommy, it's love" scrawled in uneven block letters. The paper's gone soft over the years. The tape lost its stick, but I never threw it away. So when did that boy disappear? When did the smiles turn calculating? He always knew how to twist stories, even as a teenager. "I was just trying to help," he'd say after throwing out my meds, or "You're always so sensitive," after snapping at me in front of company, but I'd chalk it up to stress. Hormones, the divorce, anything but malice. I kept defending him to everyone. "He's just tired. He's under pressure. He didn't mean it." And every time I excused him, he learned how easy I was to forgive. Now he walks through my house like it's his, corrects how I fold napkins, decides who sits where, tells me when to speak. The other night, I opened the linen closet and saw the storage bin where I kept David's childhood drawings. I reached in, hoping for something, anything, to remind me. But the lid was empty. He'd thrown them out, and I realized maybe he's not lost. Maybe he left on purpose. So now I'm done searching for the boy I raised. I'm watching the man he became. After the divorce, the silence in the house was deafening. I'd always imagined I'd enjoy it. Quiet mornings, no one muting me mid-sentence, no footsteps stomping down the hall like I was prey in my own home. But once it arrived, that silence sat heavy on my chest, like grief with no funeral. So when David called and said, "Just until I get things sorted," I said yes before he even asked the second time. He showed up with 3 duffel bags and a smile that almost felt like the old hymn. "Mom, I'll fix the cabinet hinge this weekend," he said, kissing the top of my head. "It's good to be home." And it was, for a little while. He made coffee in the mornings and brought it to me the way I used to bring soup to him when he was sick. He put on music while making dinner, old Motown records I hadn't heard in years. I started thinking, Maybe this is what healing looks like. But little things changed. He rearranged the living room without asking. "Better flow," he said, nudging my recliner to face the TV. The same recliner where I used to do crossword puzzles with my late husband every Sunday. I didn't say anything. I just watched. He took over the grocery shopping. Then my Netflix password, then the bills. When the landline rang, yes, I still have one, he picked up like he paid for it. "She's not available," I heard him say once. I was sitting right there. And one night, I found his shoes lined up neatly beneath his father's armchair. That old leather seat had been empty since the day he left. No one ever touched it. Not even me. But David sat in it like he'd earned the throne. I remember standing in the hallway that night, looking at those shoes, brown leather, polished, poised. That's when I felt it. Not the comfort of having my son back, but the presence of something else, a new ruler. And the house had become his kingdom. It began with laundry. "You're using too much detergent," David said, watching me pour from the same blue bottle I'd used since before he was born. "You'll ruin the machine." I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. Next came the kitchen. "You're storing things all wrong. This should go here. That's expired. This spice, no one even uses this anymore." It was turmeric, my mother's favorite. Then my clothes. "Those pants don't fit right. You should let Ivy take you shopping." And when I tried to host book club, just 5 women I've known for 20 years, he stood in the doorway and said, "Maybe skip this week, Mom. You seemed really tired yesterday." Tired. That word started showing up a lot. She's tired. She forgets things. She gets overwhelmed easily. He said it so kindly, so earnestly. I started to wonder if maybe he was right. The final straw, though I didn't know it yet, was the sugar bowl. A tiny porcelain piece, cream-colored with a faded gold rim. It had a small chip on the lid and a hairline crack near the base. My mother gave it to me the year I got married. We used to sit on her porch, spooning sugar into our tea, talking about everything and nothing. David picked it up one afternoon and said, "This is junk. Let's get something modern." He didn't throw it out. He just set it behind the cereal boxes, as if its disappearance wouldn't matter. But it did. That little bowl had survived 3 moves, 2 kids, and a broken marriage, and now it sat hidden behind Cheerios, like I did. The next week, Ivy's parents came over. David did all the talking, the serving, the smiling. I sat at the end of the table, nodding like one of those bobblehead dolls you see in car windows. When I reached for the sugar, there was nothing. Just a glass jar with an airtight lid and a printed label, "Organic." And I didn't say a word. I smiled. Because by then, I knew the rules, and my silence was the only thing keeping the peace. "It's just easier this way, Mom." That's what David said when he asked to be added to my bank account. He said it like he was offering me a warm coat in winter, like it was kindness, not control. "You're always forgetting to pay things on time," he added. "Let me just automate it. I'll handle everything. You deserve to rest." And didn't I? After all I'd been through, the divorce, the quiet years, the ache that never quite left, I wanted to rest. I wanted someone to take the wheel, even just for a while, so I said yes. He took my phone and set up the banking app on his. "Don't worry, I'll still show you everything," he said, patting my hand like I was a child. "It's all transparent." And at first it was. The lights stayed on. The bills went out. Groceries were delivered without fuss. I even felt a strange sense of relief, like maybe I was being taken care of for once. But then things got fuzzy. A water bill I never saw, a missed insurance letter I found in the trash. "Must have been junk mail," David said, already tossing it again before I could read it. I checked my purse one afternoon and realized the $80 I kept tucked behind the photo of my grandson was gone. David said I probably used it and forgot. I nodded. But I never forget that kind of money. Then one day I opened my sewing basket, my private little world of needles, threads, and scraps from dresses long donated, and found the savings jar was gone. It wasn't much. Just loose bills, tucked away over the years, grocery change, birthday money, a quiet safety net. Gone. "Maybe you misplaced it," David said. His voice was calm, too calm. But I hadn't. I didn't say anything that night. I just stared at the folder on the kitchen counter, the one labeled Finances in Ivy's handwriting. I'd never seen it before. And inside it, a credit card with my name on it. And I never applied. I just stood there, holding it, listening to their laughter from the living room like a soundtrack to my own unraveling. It didn't happen all at once. There was no grand argument, no slammed doors or screaming matches, just a slow hush, like someone turning the volume down on my life, one click at a time. David didn't need to shout. He had a way of looking at me, eyebrows raised, jaw just tight enough, that made the words shrivel on my tongue before they ever reached air. "Let's not confuse things, Mom. You probably don't remember it that way. It's okay, you're under a lot of stress." Always said with a smile, always said with an audience, and I believed him, not at first, but enough times, and you start to wonder if maybe your memory is a little off. Maybe you did misplace the envelope. Maybe you are tired. The house grew quieter, not in sound, but in permission. Ivy started answering the door. David took the phone. I didn't even know the Wi-Fi password anymore. Every corner of the home I built was slowly padded with silence. There's a cuckoo clock in the hallway. German wood, hand-painted, a gift from my sister before she passed. It used to chime every hour, cheerful and sharp. One morning, I noticed it hadn't chimed in days. David had removed the batteries. "It was disrupting the energy," Ivy said, sipping her smoothie. "The sound is so jarring." I didn't say a word. At dinner, I once mentioned a story from David's childhood about the time he got lost at the zoo and ended up feeding popcorn to a pelican while the staff searched for him. Everyone laughed. It was light, joyful. Until David said, "That never happened. I don't know what she's talking about." And the laughter changed, turned sour. I shrank back in my chair, cheeks burning. Ivy reached across the table and gently patted my hand like you'd calm a confused patient. "Don't worry," she said. "Memory's weird." That night, I stood in the hallway and stared at the quiet clock. No ticking, no chiming, just stillness. And I realized some silences aren't peaceful. Some silences are prison walls. And I had built mine brick by brick with every time I bit my tongue. Ivy used to knock. Now she uses a key. It appeared one day on the hook by the door, next to mine, a slim silver thing with a lavender keychain shaped like a star. I never gave it to her, but there it was, dangling like proof that the house wasn't mine anymore. She moved in gradually, the way fog rolls in, quiet, soft, until you can't see what you've lost. First, it was toiletries in the guest bathroom, then shoes at the door, then a silk robe hanging behind my bedroom door like it belonged there. Ivy didn't ask. She declared, "This couch is terrible for my back. Your kitchen lighting is depressing. You really should consider downsizing all this clutter." By clutter, she meant photo albums, handmade quilts, the bowl of plastic fruit my grandson loved to throw across the room when he was 2. One afternoon, I found her holding a small velvet box. Inside it were pearl earrings, dainty drops, gifted by my mother when my daughter was born. I'd promised them to my granddaughter one day. Ivy looked up and said, "Oh, these are gorgeous. I might borrow them for dinner Friday." "They're not for wearing," I said, gently reaching for the box. David appeared behind her like smoke. "Let her have something nice for once, Mom." And just like that, the promise was gone. I stood in the hallway that night, staring at the empty spot on my dresser where the velvet box used to be. In its place, Ivy had left a crystal diffuser, vanilla and bergamot. It smelled like hotel lobbies and department stores, cold sweetness, manufactured comfort. I opened the window to let the scent out. But it clung, like her, like the way she spoke to delivery men with my name, like the way she called the master bedroom the big one. And David just let her, praised her even. "She's bringing light into this house," he said. But it wasn't light, it was a spotlight, and I was being slowly erased from center stage. Ivy strutted through the kitchen one afternoon, wearing heels I'd only ever seen in magazines, red bottoms, the kind women whisper about on talk shows. She dropped her purse on my butcher block island like it was just another Tuesday. The bag alone looked like it could cover my mortgage from 20 years ago. "Retail therapy," she grinned, twirling. "David said I deserve it." I smiled. Of course I did. I'd already learned not to ask questions. But that week, I noticed something. The fridge was full, but not for me. Sparkling water in glass bottles, oat milk, imported cheese I couldn't pronounce. Meanwhile, my chamomile tea and plain yogurt had vanished from the shelf. I checked the receipt David left out by mistake. $528. Imported wine, truffle oil, vegan protein powder. Nothing I'd touched, nothing I'd asked for. I went to refill my prescription that afternoon, only to be told the card had been declined. "It might be a system error," the pharmacist said kindly. I paid in cash, quietly. That night, I reached for my night cream, the one I saved up for last Christmas, tucked at the back of the cabinet behind Ivy's endless serums. The jar was half empty. I hadn't used it in months, a small thing I know. Just a jar of cream, but it was mine, and it was supposed to last. I sat down on the edge of my bed, holding it in my hands like a fragile memory. The scent, rose and sandalwood, still reminded me of the last birthday my daughter came home, back when this house still echoed with laughter that didn't make me flinch. And then I saw it. The receipt. Still on the counter, smudged with fingerprints, curled at the edge. I picked it up, read every line. Lavender candles, coconut body butter, a $40 bottle of wine labeled for Ivy. Not one item for me, not even milk. I held that slip of paper like it was a verdict, because it was. It told me exactly where I stood, somewhere below the candles, and definitely below the wine. The last time I saw the banking app on my phone, it had a blue icon and a 6-digit passcode I chose myself. Now, it's gone. David said it was easier this way. "You hate passwords," he laughed, waving off my concern. "I'll handle it. You don't need to stress." And for a while, I didn't. He brought groceries, paid the plumber, said the pension checks were all fine. I stopped opening the mail. Most of it disappeared before it reached my hands anyway. But lately, I've felt something pulling at me. A flicker of doubt in the back of my throat that tastes like metal. One morning, while Ivy was at yoga and David was out running errands, I reached for my recipe binder. Hidden behind the laminated page for my mother's banana bread, I found my old password journal. Leather-bound, worn at the corners, pages filled with logins and scribbled notes in my handwriting. Tiny, neat, controlled. I flipped to the tab marked Bank, crossed out, rewritten again. I tried the number listed. My landline still works, though I'm sure David meant to disconnect it by now. "Can I verify your identity?" the woman asked gently. "Of course," I said, but the answers had changed. Mother's maiden name? Incorrect. First pet's name? Not the one on file. I felt heat crawl up my neck. "I'm sorry," the voice said. "For your protection, I'll need to end this call." Click. I sat there in my kitchen, the silent receiver still pressed to my ear, surrounded by cookbooks and the smell of burnt toast. I'd forgotten it was still in the toaster. The bitter scent filled the room like proof. I had no access, no authority, and no way to confirm what I feared, because David hadn't just moved the money, he'd moved the questions, the answers. The very language I'd need to get my life back. I set the phone down slowly and stared at the blinking cursor on the microwave clock. It was 10:48 a.m., and I didn't know how to get myself out. Yet. "Dinner on Sunday. Ivy's cooking. Dress nice, okay?" That's what David said. standing in the doorway with his arms crossed, like an invitation could be delivered like an order. He didn't ask if I was free. He didn't even ask if I wanted to be there. Just told me. I nodded, of course. By now, I'd learned that not showing up would be worse than staying quiet through it. That Saturday night, I opened my closet and stared at rows of clothes that didn't feel like mine anymore. Ivy had offered to freshen up my wardrobe a few months back. Translation: donate anything with sleeves or history. I found my old navy sweater tucked in the back, still smelling faintly of cedarwood and face cream. And I pinned my mother's pearl brooch to the shoulder, oval, elegant, slightly scuffed on the edge, a small thing. But it made me feel like someone again. When Sunday came, the house felt different. Music played low, jazz, not Motown. Ivy moved through the kitchen in linen and gold, laughing like a hostess at a charity gala. David stood at the head of the table, giving directions like he was filming a cooking show. "Mom, can you not touch that?" he snapped, swatting my hand away from the wine glasses. "They're already set." I stepped back. The roast was mine. I'd made it. But Ivy added her touch, rosemary and dried citrus slices, and took credit with a wink. "She followed my Pinterest recipe," she giggled. Guests arrived. Not family, not mine. Friends of Ivy's, colleagues of David's. People I'd never met who stepped over my threshold and complimented the lighting like I hadn't lived under it for 20 years. "Let's all sit," David called out. "And Mom, just let me talk tonight, okay? It'll be easier." Easier. That word again. Easier for who? I smiled. Tight. Polite. But inside, something settled. Not anger. Not fear. Readiness. Because this dinner wasn't a gathering. It was a stage. And I wasn't the silent extra anymore. I was the storm they didn't see coming. I left the house while Ivy was at Pilates, and David was still on his second cup of coffee. I told him I needed to pick up a prescription. He didn't even look up from his phone. Just waved his hand like I was a leaf blowing past his window. I took the old brown purse I hadn't used in years, the one with the broken clasp and the faint smell of peppermint, tucked a scarf around my hair, wore flats. No one notices women like that. We become part of the wallpaper. The walk to the bank felt longer than it used to. Maybe it was the weight in my chest. Maybe it was knowing I was about to learn something I couldn't unlearn. The branch was quiet, cool air, sterile lighting, the faint hiss of printers. I stepped up to the counter and asked for a full printed statement of my checking and savings accounts. The young teller's smile faded as she typed. "Would you like to sit, ma'am?" She passed me to someone else. Elise, her name tag read. A manager. Kind eyes, quiet voice. I sat across from her and waited while she printed page after page. Transactions I didn't recognize. Transfers I never approved. Amounts too high to explain with groceries or gas. I saw boutique names, foreign charges, something labeled Wellness Retreat Deposit. There was a $3,000 withdrawal marked Home Improvement. We hadn't even changed the curtains. Elise looked at me, not with pity, with recognition. "Would you like a copy for yourself?" she asked. I nodded. She clipped them together and slid them across the desk. I tucked them inside my purse like folded truth, like armor. On the way home, my steps felt uneven. The trees looked different. The streets too wide. Everything too open, too exposed. When I reached the house, I didn't go in right away. I stood on the porch and stared at the front door. This house had seen me carry babies, bury a marriage, stitch wounds, and serve roast dinners no one remembered. And now it would see me reclaim something. I opened the door, walked into my kitchen, and placed the papers beside the stove. Tonight, I would read, and this time, no one would interrupt me. I waited until the house was empty again. David had taken Ivy to the florist. Something about centerpieces, and I knew I had maybe an hour before they returned. I made a cup of tea, sat at the kitchen table, and laid the bank papers out like puzzle pieces. Line by line, page by page. I circled things with a red pen from the drawer where I used to keep cookie cutters. A drawer that hadn't seen cookies in years. The amounts weren't small. 1,000 here. $2,000 there. Names I didn't recognize. Stores I'd never stepped into. And the dates. One charge from a luxury home goods site was made on the day I was in the hospital with bronchitis. I remember because I'd asked David to bring my knitting, and instead, he brought me his silence. I flipped to the next page. Recurring charges labeled consulting, $500 every other week. I don't know what Ivy consults on, but I know she doesn't work. Then I saw a transfer to an account I didn't even know existed. Same bank, different number, same name, mine. But I never opened it. My hands began to shake. I reached for my tea and knocked the spoon onto the floor. It clattered, sharp and metallic, like the world trying to snap me out of something. I stared at the mug in my hands. Ceramic, chipped on the handle. World's Best Mom, printed in fading gold. David gave it to me when he was 13. There was hot chocolate inside and a handmade card that said, "Thanks for being my anchor." I set the mug down slowly. Now I was drowning in his lies. When I finished going through the stack, I clipped the pages together and slid them into a manila envelope I found in the hall cabinet. The same one where I used to keep report cards and school pictures. I ran my fingers across the edges like sealing up something sacred, and I whispered, not to the house, not to the clock, but to myself. They think I won't say anything. They think I won't fight. But they're wrong. I went back to the bank the next morning. Same clothes, same purse, same quiet resolve. Only this time, I didn't ask for information. I asked for proof. Elise met me at the front with a nod. She didn't smile, not out of coldness, but out of respect, as if she knew this wasn't a day for pretending anything was fine. "I'd like copies of everything from yesterday," I said, "and I need the most serious ones notarized." She didn't flinch, just gestured for me to follow her. We sat in her office again, this time without the hesitation. As the printer hummed and pages stacked neatly on the tray, Elise tapped her pen and said, "You don't have to tell me details, but if this is going where I think it is, it might help to have a witness." "A witness?" "If things escalate," she said gently, "you'll want someone who saw the original documents, someone neutral." I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of what she wasn't saying. She handed me a clean white folder, crisp, new, no stains, no tears. Not like the manila envelope I'd stuffed the originals into. This one felt intentional, like armor. We went through the statements one by one. She notarized the ones with the largest transfers, the boutique charges, the account I never opened. Each stamp was a pulse, a heartbeat, a record of truth. "You're not crazy," she said softly as she finished. "Don't let them make you feel like you are." I swallowed hard. That sentence did something to me, like stitching up a wound I hadn't realized was still open. When I stood to leave, she walked me to the door and pressed a business card into my palm. "Call if you need anything, even if it's just to breathe." I walked home holding that folder like it was sacred scripture. In the hallway mirror, I caught my own reflection. Older? Yes, but not broken. Tonight, David would talk. Ivy would smile. But this time, I wouldn't come empty-handed. And even if they didn't know it yet, I wouldn't be alone. The table was set like a magazine cover. White linen napkins folded into swans, crystal glasses that hadn't seen daylight since my wedding anniversary a decade ago, candles flickering low, throwing golden shadows across the ceiling like a church service in disguise. Ivy floated through the room in a white silk dress, carrying herself like royalty. She wore my mother's cameo brooch pinned at the collar. She didn't ask. David moved through the guests like a host at a charity gala, confident, easy, performing. "Try the Chardonnay," he said to a man I didn't recognize. "We picked it up on the coast last month." We? I hadn't been anywhere. I sat at the far end of the table, 2 seats from the head, right beside the floral arrangement Ivy had centered to block my view. The folder sat in my lap, tucked beneath the napkin. I didn't eat. I didn't sip. I just watched. I watched Ivy tap the polished silver bell to call in the main course. The sound was sharp, metallic, final. She giggled. "Isn't that just divine?" I found it in the attic and thought, why not? It wasn't hers to find. It was my mother's. David carved the roast like a king feeding guests from a stolen throne. He told stories from his work, half of them exaggerated, half of them outright lies. Ivy laughed too hard at every punchline. No one looked at me. I was the wallpaper again, the warm body to fill the chair, the woman who used to own the home. But inside, I was vibrating. The pages in my lap felt warm from the heat of my skin. I pressed my hand to them like a mother checking the forehead of a fevered child. Not yet. Not here. But soon. Ivy lifted her glass. "Now that we're all here," she said, her voice sweet and chilling, "let's toast to family." David smiled at me, to the woman who made all of this possible. His eyes locked on mine, daring me. I touched the folder under the linen, and I smiled back. Tonight, they would learn what I made possible. David always did know how to play a room. He leaned back in his chair, wine glass in hand, legs crossed like a man with nothing to fear. "It's been a big transition," he said, his voice soft, almost regretful. "Mom's had a lot on her plate since the divorce." Ivy placed her hand gently over his like a stage cue. "But we're just happy we can be here for her. It's a lot for one person, you know, at her age." At her age. That line slid across the table like a blade wrapped in silk. The guests nodded, smiled. One of them, Helen, I think her name was, reached for the bowl of lemon-glazed carrots and said, "It's so wonderful she has you two." I didn't speak. My glass was still empty. David had poured for everyone, even topped off Ivy twice. Mine sat untouched, water beads forming a nervous ring on the linen tablecloth. He raised his voice just enough. "Mom doesn't always remember everything, but she's doing really well, considering." Considering what? That I remember exactly where every dollar went? That I watched him drain accounts I spent years tending like rose bushes? That I kept my silence while they turned my home into a showroom and my life into a prop? Ivy nodded. "We keep the stress low, no sudden changes, just stability." I pressed the folder tighter against my lap, the edge of it digging into my thigh. They weren't speaking to me. They were speaking about me, and no one noticed the difference, except me. A small laugh rippled around the table when David told a story about the time I accidentally set the oven on broil and burned a casserole. Only, that never happened. That was his mistake. I remembered it clearly because I was the one who cleaned the soot for hours while he blamed the appliance. But tonight, he wore the memory like a joke. "Mom knows we're just trying to help," he said, turning to me, voice dipped in honey. And that's when I shifted in my seat, unfolded the folder, straightened the pages. No more acting. They wanted a performance. Now they'd get the finale. I didn't raise my voice, not at first. I just stood. The chair made a soft sound against the hardwood floor, nothing more than a breath in a room full of noise. At first, no one noticed. David was halfway through another joke about my technology troubles, and Ivy had just refilled her wine. But then they saw me, saw the folder in my hand, and the room paused. "I'd like to read something," I said, voice steady but low. Ivy blinked. "What, like a poem?" David laughed, nervously. "Mom, this isn't really the—" I opened the folder. "Transaction ID 4683902, I read. Date, 3 weeks ago. Amount, $2,137. Vendor, Lux Skin Clinic." The air shifted. I continued. "Transaction ID 4684561. Amount, $1,070. Vendor, Bramble Encumbered Interior Design." A fork clinked against a plate. "Transaction ID 4684773. Amount, $3,000. Transfer to account ending in 9917. Opened under my name. I never authorized it." David stood up. "Okay, that's enough." "No," I said, louder now. "It's not." The folder felt heavier than it should have, but my voice didn't shake anymore. I turned the page. Recurring charge, $500, bi-weekly. Description, consulting services, Ivy Ray. Ivy's face went pale. "This isn't the time," David hissed, stepping toward me. "We'll talk about this later." I didn't move. "You've been siphoning my savings, using my name, my accounts, my trust. You told me not to speak tonight." And I listened. For a long time. I looked at the guests, each of them frozen in place, holding forks mid-air, wine glasses tilted, jaws slack with disbelief. One glass at the center of the table trembled slightly, just enough to send a ripple across the wine inside. "I've documented everything," I said calmly, "and I'm not finished reading." I took a breath. This was only the first page. The next would burn the room down, and I wasn't afraid of fire anymore. I flipped to the next page. Every eye in the room was locked on me now. No one touched their wine. No one even breathed too loudly. Transaction ID 4691088, I read. Date, while I was in the hospital. Amount, $4,600. Transfer to account ending in 99117. Signature on file, my name. I never signed it. I turned the page. David's hand landed on my arm. "Mom, that's enough." I didn't even look at him. Transaction ID 4692022. Boutique charge, $840. Description, custom floral gown. Purchased using my credit card. I looked directly at Ivy. She wore the dress last weekend to a wine tasting in the garden. "I thought it was a gift," she said, voice smaller now. "David said that I approved it?" I interrupted. "He says a lot of things." Murmurs broke out around the table. Helen leaned toward her husband and whispered something. The man across from her cleared his throat and pushed his chair back an inch. David's face was red now, not embarrassed, furious. "She's confused," he said, eyes darting. "This is a misunderstanding. She's been under a lot of stress." "No," I said, calm as breath. "You have." I turned toward the hallway and gestured toward the wall. Everyone followed my gaze. A small framed photo hung there. David at 6 years old. Holding a paper crown I helped him make in preschool. It used to hang in the hallway near the front door. Ivy moved it last month, said it disrupted the aesthetic. "This house raised you," I said quietly. "Every beam, every plate on this table, every nail in the floorboards, I paid for with late shifts, stretch meals, and prayers." David took a step closer, voice low and trembling with rage. "You're humiliating yourself." I shook my head. "I'm revealing you." Then I read the final line. Authorization request, signed Marjorie Elaine Carter. Timestamp 2:14 p.m. The day I was in a hospital bed with an oxygen mask on my face. I looked at Ivy. "You forged my signature." I looked at David. "You let her." Silence. Then I said what no one else would. "That's not just theft." I placed the paper gently on the table. "That's forgery." David moved fast, faster than I expected. He lunged across the table, knocking over a wine glass. The red spilled like a wound across the white linen, soaking into Ivy's centerpiece roses. The scent of citrus and alcohol rose sharply in the air. "Give me the folder," he hissed. I didn't flinch. I pulled it tighter against my chest like a shield. "You don't want to do this here," he said through clenched teeth. "Here is where it happened," I said calmly. "Here is where it ends." Ivy pushed her chair back, hand trembling, mascara already smudged. "This wasn't malicious," she stammered. "It was just, we didn't think you'd mind. You seemed—" "Weak?" I asked, locking eyes with her. She looked away. Another guest, Martin from David's office, I think, quietly reached into his pocket and tapped his phone screen. I saw the camera light blink once, then settle. He was recording now. David noticed too. His hand froze mid-reach. I laid another paper on the table, a notarized statement. Signed, stamped, certified. From the bank. From Elise. I didn't have to raise my voice. I didn't have to scream or sob. I had receipts. You've been moving funds under my name. You've used my accounts to fund your lifestyle. You've forged my signature. You've isolated me in my own home and made me question my own memory. No one meant to hurt you, Ivy whispered. But you did, I said. I looked around the table. The guests weren't smiling anymore. They weren't sipping or laughing or asking about renovations. They were witnesses now, and I was done being the exhibit. From the hallway, a soft sound broke the tension. 3 gentle knocks on the front door. Everyone turned. David paled. I folded the last page, slid it back into the folder, and walked toward the door. I told you, I said over my shoulder. I didn't come empty-handed. I reached for the doorknob. And I'm not alone. I opened the door. And there she was. Elise stood on the porch, calm as ever, a manila envelope tucked under her arm and her ID badge clipped to her jacket. "Evening, Miss Carter," she said, like we were just continuing a polite conversation. "I brought the documents you requested." I stepped aside. "Come in." Her heels clicked softly across the hardwood as she entered. The din of the dining room behind me had turned into a hush. Ivy's mouth hung open slightly. David didn't blink. "Elise Bennett," she said, nodding at the table. "Branch manager, Wells First Bank." She set the envelope gently at the center of the table, beside the spilled wine and the stunned silence. "These are certified duplicates of the financial statements and notarized records from this week. Ms. Carter requested I bring them personally." David finally found his voice. "This is a private dinner." Elise turned her gaze to him, professional but unyielding. "And this is a matter of documented fraud. I'm here as a witness." He opened his mouth again, but nothing came out. I watched Ivy fold in on herself, shoulders tightening like fabric pulled too tight. Her wine glass sat untouched. Her fork rested mid-air. Elise continued, "These documents confirm multiple unauthorized transactions, forged signatures, and evidence of misappropriated funds. We've already escalated them to our internal legal team, but Ms. Carter wished to deliver them here, to make her position clear." I stepped forward, slow, deliberate. Elise and I didn't need a plan. We already had one. I picked up the envelope and set it beside mine. Twin folders, one warm from my hands, the other crisp and clean, untouched by lies. They said I was confused, I told the table, that I didn't remember things, that I was tired. I looked directly at David, but I remembered enough to call her. I turned to Ivy. I remembered enough to get a witness. Elise met my eyes and gave the smallest nod. "I'm not here for drama," I said. "I'm here for clarity." Elise placed her hand lightly on the table. "She asked for a witness," she said, her voice even. "And now she has one." David's voice changed first. He softened it. Tilted his head, used the same tone he did when he was 7 and wanted a second slice of pie. "Mom, come on." That word used to mean something. Now it felt like bait. "We can fix this," he said, stepping closer. "Just us. No need for all this drama. You're letting outsiders into our family business." Ivy dabbed at her eyes with a cloth napkin, though her cheeks were still dry. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I thought everything was fine. David handled the money. I didn't ask questions." "You wore the answers," I said. "Around your wrist, on your feet, in my missing pearl earrings." Her jaw clenched. "You have the statements," David said quickly, trying to get ahead of the collapse. "Fine. Okay, but let's not destroy each other over a few mistakes." He stepped closer. "You raised me better than this." I stared at him. "No," I said. "I raised you with everything I had. You chose what to do with it." I picked up one of the plates from the table, clean, unused, untouched by the roast we never ate. I wiped away a single drop of wine with the edge of my napkin. Then I set it down, steady. "There will be no more shared accounts," I said. "No more access. I will file the police report tonight, and tomorrow morning, the locks will be changed." Someone at the table, A guest I barely knew stood up, eyes wide. "I think we should go," he said quietly. The others murmured agreement, rising like ghosts from the ashes of a party that had burned to the bone. I didn't stop them. Let them go. Let them take the lie with them. David's shoulders dropped as the last guest slipped out the door. The mask cracked. Just a flicker. Then he tried one last time. "You'd really do this to your own son?" I stepped forward, folder in hand, wine-soaked linen at my feet. "You already did it to me. And now I'm just giving it back." The door slammed so hard the floor shook. David didn't say goodbye. Just a storm of footsteps, a slammed cabinet door, and then silence. But Ivy didn't follow him. She stood frozen at the edge of the dining room, her napkin still clenched in one hand, mascara smudged, mouth open like she was waiting for someone to give her her next line. "What happens now?" she asked softly. I didn't answer. Not right away. I walked past her, through the dining room, into the kitchen. My kitchen. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself see it. The mismatched mugs Ivy had hidden behind uniform glass ones. The old calendar I used to write birthdays on, now replaced with a cleaner aesthetic. The family photo that had been moved. The drawer labeled tea filled with nothing but imported matcha and oat milk sachets. I opened the cabinet beside the fridge and reached to the back. There it was, my mother's sugar bowl, porcelain, slightly chipped, delicate as memory. I brought it out and set it on the counter where it used to live. It wasn't about the sugar, it was about saying, "I'm still here." I turned to Ivy, who was still standing. "I need you to pack your things," I said. She blinked. "Tonight?" "No," I said calmly. "By morning." She looked like she might cry. But I'd seen her fake tears before. She opened her mouth, then closed it, and then she walked away. I gathered the folders from the table, stacked the printed statements, and placed them inside the drawer where I once kept family recipes. Maybe I'd bake again soon. Maybe I wouldn't. The house was quiet now. No jazz, no fake laughter, no correction in every breath. I made myself a cup of tea, black, plain, no foam, and I sat down at the table. Just me, no audience, no performance, only a woman with her name back, and a kitchen that finally felt like home. I walked into the bank just after opening hours. This time, there was no scarf, no disguise, no trembling hands. Just me, standing tall. Elise saw me before I reached the counter and met me halfway. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded. Together we sat in her office and went through the steps one by one, close the joint accounts, remove authorized users, secure the remaining balances. She explained everything clearly, with the patience of someone who understands that dignity comes in the details. When the final document was placed before me, I picked up the pen. My signature used to feel like a formality. Today, it felt like a declaration. I signed slowly, with care. Marjorie Elaine Carter. No edits, no hesitation, no one watching over my shoulder, just ink on paper and peace in my spine. Elise smiled, handing me the confirmation copy. "You did it." Outside the bank, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Attached was a short video. I tapped play. There I was, standing at the dinner table, reading from the folder. Ivy pale, David stunned, the room holding its breath. A guest must have recorded it. The video was already being shared. The truth had legs now, and they weren't mine to carry alone anymore. At home, I called a locksmith. The young man arrived within the hour. Quick hands, quiet manner, respectful silence. He handed me a small bag with 3 new keys. "Keep a spare in the freezer," he said, smiling. "Thieves never check there." I laughed, really laughed. It startled me. I placed the keys in a small ceramic dish on the hallway table. A wedding gift, once buried in the back of the linen closet. Now it held something better than rings. It held my future. No more door handles turning at midnight. No more questions about where the money went. No more performances at the table I bought with 20 years of paychecks. The lock clicked with finality. Not a threat. Not a wall. Just a boundary that said, "You don't live here anymore, and I do." There's a silence that comes after noise, not absence, not emptiness, but space. And in the days that followed, I walked through it like someone learning to breathe again. I started in the smallest places. The sewing basket tucked behind the armchair, still missing the savings jar, but full of scraps from a life I'd paused. I ran my fingers along the spools of thread, blue, cream, a frayed ribbon from the dress I wore to David's graduation. I had saved it once, before I was told to forget what mattered. Then the bookshelf. 2 of my favorite novels had been replaced with Ivy's minimalist decor, white vases and a stack of books no one read. I took them down, dusted the spines of the stories that shaped me, ran a hand along their worn covers like you'd greet old friends. I opened the dresser drawer and found something I thought I'd lost years ago. A music box, carved wood, brass hinge, velvet lining. It used to play Moon River when I wound it. I did, slowly, expecting silence. But the song played, wobbly, imperfect, beautiful. That shaky melody filled the room like a memory with a heartbeat. I sat on the edge of my bed and listened, eyes closed, shoulders loose. It wasn't loud, but it was mine. Later that afternoon, I took down the photo Ivy had hidden, the one of David at 6, wearing the paper crown I made for his birthday. I didn't take it down to punish him. I took it down to forgive myself. I placed it in a box with other pieces I wasn't ready to throw away, but no longer wanted displayed. Then I swept the floors, cleaned the stove, opened the windows wide, bought a new notebook, and wrote my name on the inside cover. Marjorie E. Carter. Just like when I used to label the kids' lunchboxes, a reminder, a signature, a spell. That night, I sat in the quiet with a cup of tea and no agenda. The clock ticked, the windows breathed, and I whispered, not to anyone else but just to myself, I didn't just survive this. I ended it. I met the lawyer at noon. Her office smelled like fresh paper and lavender, her desk spotless but warm. "Miss Carter," she said, shaking my hand, "I've seen cases like yours, but rarely where the victim is this prepared." Victim. That word didn't sting the way it used to. We went through the documents. Every page Elise had stamped, every screenshot, every transfer, every forged signature. She nodded as she read, occasionally underlining things with a blue pen. "He left a trail," she said. "It's strong." I signed a few more papers, real ones this time, with weight. Not things David snuck in front of me with a too cheerful voice. When I left, I didn't feel shaken. I felt aligned. On the walk home, my phone buzzed. Melanie. My daughter's name looked strange on the screen after so long. We hadn't been close, not since the divorce, not since her job moved her states away. I answered. "Mom?" Her voice was soft, hesitant. "I saw the video," she said. "People are talking." I didn't respond right away. Then, "It's true." A pause. Then, "I figured it was." We didn't talk long, just enough. I told her the basics. She didn't offer advice or judgment, just listened. At the end, she said, "You didn't deserve that. Any of it." After we hung up, I went to the freezer. Tucked in the back was a container of soup, chicken with wild rice. I had made it for Melanie the last time she visited, back when I still cooked to convince her that everything was fine. I never served it. She had left early that weekend. I reheated the soup for myself, ate it slowly. Every spoonful tasted like something familiar, but different. Not sorrow, not guilt, just comfort. I washed the bowl by hand, dried it, placed it back in the cabinet with care. The phone buzzed again. Melanie. "If you want company next week, I can come by." I stared at the screen for a long time, then I typed, "I'd like that," and hit send. The house is quieter now, Not empty, just honest. No background music humming from a speaker I never turned on. No artificial scents lingering in the hallway. No footsteps that made me brace, just the wind through the trees and the sound of my own breath. This morning, I woke without dread. I didn't check the bank app first thing. Didn't listen for the rustle of someone else's keys in my kitchen. I made tea, set the table for one, folded a linen napkin, not perfectly, but lovingly. The way my mother used to when she wanted a moment to feel special, even if no one else would see it. The sugar bowl sat at the center, filled again, not just with sugar, but with something softer, gentler, possibility. I'd started journaling. Nothing fancy, just a few lines a day. Today I wrote, "There's peace in being the only voice in the room when it's finally yours." A knock came around 10. Not harsh, not unexpected. I opened the door. Melanie stood there with a small suitcase and eyes that looked like mine when I was younger. She didn't say much. Just, "Hi, Mom." I stepped aside. She came in. We didn't hug right away. We didn't cry. We just sat. She poured the tea. I passed the sugar. The clock ticked. The house, once a stage for lies and theft, now felt like something else entirely, like home. And as I sat at that table, sunlight across my hands, daughter across from me, breath steady in my chest, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel broken. I just felt here, present, real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free.